Times can get pretty rough in life. When things fall apart, we may be confused. We don't know what's going on. We're asking a lot of questions. We're depressed. We have anxiety. We have stress. We're wondering, what's happening? What's going on? Why is this happening to me? Things can get so bad that we're in a really, really dark place. We want to give up. I know I felt like that many times in my life where I just wanted to hide. I just wanted to disappear for a little bit. Not completely. I didn't want to die, but I wanted out of the pain and the confusion and the stress and the anxiety. I wanted a reprieve from it. I couldn't take it anymore. I just wanted to be freed from all of it. I wanted to check out temporarily. But I couldn't because I really didn't want to die. I didn't want to die. I wanted to live, but I wanted to really, really live. But I didn't know how. I didn't have the right tools. I didn't have understanding. I had a lot of knowledge, but not understanding. I didn't know what to do about my problems. I didn't know what to do about my situations. Until I learned that the answers to all of my questions, to all of my issues, all of my adversities were found inside of me. But it was hard as hell digging them out, those answers. It was hard to dig them out because a lot was blocking me. A lot was in my way. I was resistant to the changes that I needed to make, but I knew that I had to make those changes. What did I learn that turned it all around? What did I learn? What I learned changed my life. I learned that there's an order to the chaos that you see in the world. And there's an order to the chaos that you see in your life. That was huge for me to get this. Because from my vantage point, I couldn't understand how that could be. How could it be possible that in the chaos of my life, the drama of my life, the pains of my life, that there was order to it? What did I find out that brought this understanding to me? I found out that failing structures and systems are the order that's in the chaos. They had to fall, these systems, in order for the order to be shown in my life. I had to allow these structures to fall. I had to look at my religious indoctrinations. At the time, I was a Muslim. And for a while, it was working for me. At least it seemed like it was working for me. But I had a whole lot of restrictions. I lived a very restricted life. And I was okay to some degree, or I should say to a large extent, to restrictions, because my early start of restricted of a restricted life was growing up as a Jehovah's Witness. My parents raised me as a Jehovah's Witness. And that indoctrination and belief system was over my life. It influenced my thinking. It influenced my beliefs, even my knowledge and understanding of things were taken from these systems and structures and indoctrinations. So, like I said, anyone who knows anything about Jehovah's Witnesses, they know that they live pretty much a restricted life, and they seclude themselves from other people or from people who are not of their denomination or affiliation, religious affiliation. And they encourage their members to stay away from people who don't believe as they do. So, although I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, when I became an adult, I was able to make my own decisions and decided that being a Jehovah's Witness wasn't for me. I felt that a lot of their teachings didn't highlight the fact that God is within us, and it didn't speak to or address those premises. And I had a problem with that because intuitively I knew that God was within us. And I also knew that God was more than spirit, like they tried to teach us. But anyway, that's a whole long story. Just wanted to give you a backdrop of my background and where I came from. So my best friends lived around the corner, and they introduced me to Islam. And I was immediately attracted to Islam from the perspective of the Nation of Islam under Minister Louis Farrakhan. And I was attracted to his delivery of his message. I felt that he was an eloquent speaker and passionate, and he had a lot of enthusiasm. And I was attracted to the fact that it talked a lot about Black history and where we came from. And a lot of other religions didn't really go that route in teaching you those things. So because I was searching for who I was, that was attractive to me, because it gave me a connection to who I felt I was. So, like I said, it was a restricted life, and I lived it to the letter. I was a Muslim for 20 years of my life. And I eventually left religion altogether. That's a whole nother story I'll share with you on another occasion, but summing it up a bit, or shortening it a bit. I left my religious indoctrinations because I wanted to be free. And I started to awaken, and I started to realize that it was a form of control. And it also was keeping me in a box and keeping me restricted in so many ways, that as I grew and took in knowledge and gained understanding, I realized that it wasn't for me anymore. And I realized altogether that no religion was for me. I'm deeply spiritual, but not religious. And there's a difference. Anyway, as these structures began to fall in my life, as I grew, as I awakened, like I said, the religious system had fallen in my life. It failed me. And also in my relationship area of my life, my romantic relationship began to fail me as well. Like I said in part one, I wanted to be in love. I was married, but I wasn't in love. So I was trying to force something to be that wasn't supposed to be. So, highlighting what I said earlier about there being an order to the chaos that you see in the world, it's hard to see that when you're in the midst of a lot of drama, of a lot of pain, when you're stressed out, when you're full of anxiety. It's hard to see that. In fact, you can't see it from that vantage point because you're not at the level to be able to see it. So something's coming, like I said in part one, to fill the spaces of the systems and the structures that have failed you in your life, that have fallen, that no longer can serve you. Something's coming into that space. You're being called to something more. As such, when things look crazy, it's important not to be fooled by appearances. Because if we're fooled by appearances, it will stick us and we'll be stuck. And we'll believe that we can't get up from under it. And it will become an obstacle in our lives. What do I mean by being fooled by appearances? That means when you're observing your life from a vantage point of adversity, of drama, of struggle, of pain, of deep, deep pain, you may feel like a victim. You may feel like the world's against you. But there are no victims. There are no victims. There are just unconscious victims. Meaning they don't know that they see themselves as a victim when they're engulfed in the pain, when they're engulfed in the adversity. But the mentality of a victim is definitely fooled by appearances. They're powerless to change their lives because they live their life by circumstances and conditions. So how do we get away from it? How do we come away from this? From not letting the struggles and the adversities get us, keep us in a stuck place. How do we come away from it? The first step to getting away from it is to be responsible. And I'll talk a little bit more on that in a moment. So, if you've listened to my video on The World Has Been Waiting for You, you can go check it out on YouTube. The World Has Been Waiting for You. And I spoke about a call on your life. I spoke about the fact that the world has been waiting for you. So the only way that you could be depressed is if you don't understand how to live your preferences. See, a depressed person wants something. They desire something that they don't have at the moment. They desire something that they're not getting. So they have a preference for what they want. They may not have clarity about what those preferences are. Or they may be led by fear to acquire those preferences or to live those preferences. They might be afraid of offending someone if they live their preferences. They might be afraid of losing something if they live those preferences. They may not feel worthy to live those preferences. They may feel like they'll be punished by God if they live their preferences. This is something important to highlight here, because I remember, like I said earlier, I was married. I was unhappily married, and I was not in love. For a long, long, long time, 19 years, I lived in fear because I felt guilty. I knew I wanted something more. I knew I wanted to live my preferences, but I didn't feel like I was worthy because I was conflicted. I was confused. Part of my religious indoctrinations didn't make me feel like I had a right to choose what I wanted. I felt like God would punish me if I walked away from the commitment that I made under Him. You know how it is when you get married. You feel like it's supposed to be for life. And because of my religious belief systems, it made me believe that you're obligated to stay with that person. That was my belief at that time. And then the higher part of me was pulling me towards something more. But then I felt this extreme guilt. I felt so guilty. I felt guilty when I was making attempts to choose myself, even for even thinking about choosing myself. Even if I didn't take the action yet, I felt guilty for even thinking it. So I suppressed a lot of my emotions. I suppressed a lot of my feelings. And these emotions and these feelings lived inside of me. And a war was taking place inside of me. And I was under deep stress and anxiety. Why? Because I was not living the truth of who I was. I was living someone else's version of who I should be and what I should be and how I should be. I was not allowing myself to live my preferences. I was not allowing myself to choose myself. It was not until I had enough that I began to surrender. I had to surrender. It was either that or die, because it was at that point that I knew that if I continued the way that I was going, I was surely going to die. You have no idea. I had anxiety from my head to my toes. And I lived like that, in a constant state of fight or flight. I lived that on a consistent basis, on a daily basis. I lived that because I knew I wanted something more, but I was fighting it. Why? Because I was living by the programs of my religious indoctrinations, of my childhood indoctrinations, and even societal indoctrinations. But all of these systems were failing me. All of these structures were falling in my life. And I couldn't uphold them anymore. The more I grew, the more they fell. And I had to make a choice. I had to surrender to divine guidance. I had to allow the will of heaven to flow through me. I had to allow it to guide me. And it required a lot of trust. It required radical trust. So you may say, how do you do that? How do you surrender and allow divine guidance to show you the way, to lead you, to guide you? It takes radical trust. Radical trust. Radical trust is about faith. And faith is about allowing. Allowing what? Just the fact that you have a need means that you are asking for something. Ask, and ye shall receive. Seek, and ye shall find. So if I've been asking and I have not found what I've been wanting, how is it that I'm not receiving what I want? It has everything to do with how much you are allowing yourself to have what you want. How much are you allowing yourself to have what you want? You can't allow if you're not surrendering to divine guidance. You can't be guided if you don't trust. You can't trust if you don't have patience. Perseverance and patience to endure. So how can you allow something and have faith in something? And how can you have radical trust in something if your circumstances are telling you that everything's falling apart? You have to know that there is something bigger going on. There's something bigger going on in this situation. Everything is happening for a reason. And if everything's happening for a reason, what is the reason that this is happening? What you don't understand is that it's all about you. Your life is about you. Other people may share your life with you, but your life, your personal life, is about you. The people in your life are trying to get you to understand something about you that you may not know. The circumstances of your life are trying to get you to understand something about yourself. The adversities and struggles and traumas and anxieties and stresses of your life are trying to get you to understand something about you. So what is it trying to tell you about you? It's trying to tell you that when things fall apart, that there is an order to the chaos that you see in your life. So the troubles, the denials, the setbacks are your teachers, your guides, and your allies. They're your teachers, your guides, and your allies. They're trying to teach you something about yourself. So in order to understand what they're trying to teach you, you have work to do. You have work to do. In fact, all of us have work to do. We just don't know that we have work to do. We're not taught that we have work to do. No one grows without doing work. No one transforms their life without doing the work. So it's about rectification. Rectification before progress. So things are falling apart because you have to make corrections. You have to make some adjustments. There's some things that you have to mend. There's some things that you may have to restore, that you have to redress, that you have to balance. So in times of trouble, the best thing that you can do for yourself is to go within. But a precursor to going within means that you can't even go in and get something of value if you're not willing to take 100% responsibility for every single thing that is happening in your life. That means that you have to get away from the victim mentality. You have to get away from the victim mentality. because that mentality will keep you stuck. And it will make you powerless. You will have no power to change your life. The victim has no power to change their life because they're looking for something outside of themselves. Everything outside of themselves is what they're looking for to remedy their situation. They're looking for sympathy. They're pitying themselves. The woe me syndrome. So when you begin to take 100% responsibility for your life, you can begin to do the work. That's the first step towards embarking on doing the work. I read a book called How to Get From Where You Are Now to Where You Want to Be by James Canfield. And in the book, Jack Canfield. I don't know why I'm calling him James. Jack Canfield. Sorry, Jack. Oh my goodness. I'm calling you James. Anyway, in the book, Jack was speaking to Clement Stone, who was his mentor. He worked for him at the time. And he was asking him questions about, how to change his life. Clement Stone at the time was worth a couple of $1 million and very, very wealthy man, self-made millionaire, many times over. And Jack wanted to learn from him. And he said to him, how can I change my life? And he said, unless you are willing to take 100% responsibility for every single thing that's ever happened to you in your life, I can't help you. I'm not going to work with you. That hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm telling you guys, that hit me like a ton of bricks. It's like a light bulb went off in my head. And for the first time, I was able to recognize that I was holding myself back. I was stuck because I was seeing myself through the eyes of a victim. Yes, I was plagued with a victim mentality. I was feeling sorry for myself. I didn't take responsibility for my life. I didn't understand what it all meant. I didn't understand the benefit of taking 100% responsibility, nor did I see how I was ruining my life by not taking any responsibility. So when he said that to him, I said, wow. And this was a man that I looked up to because, he wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, all these wonderful chicken soup books. And I looked up to him as one of my mentors or people that I admired in the self-help industry. So when he said that, Clement Stone said that to him, I said, wow, so what about me? Where am I not taking responsibility for myself in my life? And I began to look at all the areas of my life. I started to pinpoint how I was blaming other people for the conditions of my life. I was blaming my childhood, my upbringing, my parents to some degree. I was blaming my ex-husband for the situation that I went through in my marriage at the time. I was blaming everything outside of myself for my situation. And I remember one of my famous statements all the time. I used to say, If this, that, and the other didn't happen, you know how far I'd be? I know I'm not the only one who felt like that. Boy, if this didn't happen to me, you know how far I would be? I was using that as a reason to not to be great or to excel or move to the next level. It was an excuse. And those excuses kept me from doing the work. They kept me from doing the work. But when I began to take 100% responsibility for my life in every single area of my life, I started to become empowered again. And I started to realize that the power was always with me. You remember in Star Trek when, who was it that said, Luke Skywalker, someone was saying to him, may the power be with you. May the force be with you. So the force and the power was always with me. But because I saw myself as a victim, I couldn't see it. I didn't have the clarity to see it because my standpoint or my viewpoint or my perspective was from the perspective of a victim. So I'm saying all that to say, unless you are willing to take 100% responsibility for every single thing that happens to you in your life can't change. You can't be helped. You can't come out of the fog. And when things fall apart, you're really, really, really going to fall apart with the things that fall apart. So there's work to be done. There are corrections that need to be made. And as you begin to take 100% responsibility for your life, you'll be able to see what you need to work on.